Hello there, and welcome to the English Language Club. It is not Tuesday like normal, it's Saturday today, but we are here doing our live stream at I was going to say new slot, but this may be the new slot, but we'll have to see how things go. But we have got Susanta here and someone else who I can't read the name. Let us know where you're from. Susana's saying surprise, because I guess people weren't aware that we were going to go live today. The last couple of weeks we've been unable to do the Tuesday normal time. In fact, we're not going to be able to do that time for the foreseeable future. So we're still trying to think about what will be the best slot. We're trying out this one for now. We've got Frank Gonzalez. He says, hi, teachers. Hello there. So how are you, Tony?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. It's a weekend. I practically got to sleep in today before the live stream.
Okay,
how about you?
We're doing it a little bit later. Well, this is one of my work days, so I'm working after this, so on my other job. So that's going to be difficult. But yeah, it's all good. All good, having a good time. The weather is really nice. It's getting very springy now here in the UK.
Yeah, same here. We had, it was like 16, 17 degrees here a couple of days this week. Yeah, the snow is melted off of our garden, so we might do some stuff in the garden today.
Cool. Okay, well, let's get into it then. So we do have a few people watching, and if you're watching for the first time, what we do is we're just here to answer any questions you have about learning English. So if you have any questions, please, start writing them now in the chat so that we can help you, because that's what we're here for. We haven't got any questions yet. So now, saying that though, we do have a Discord channel, and we did have a question in there from Jack, who says, where is it? Jack says, what's a grammatical case? How do they work in English? So, grammatical case, Tony. Is this something?
Yeah. So, a grammatical case in English, and in many other languages, you change the verb based on how it's being used, right? We mainly call that tense, but also things like passive voice and things like modal verbs, anything that changes the verb. Case is what we call anything that changes the form of nouns or pronouns and some other parts of speech. Now, so for instance, in some languages, if you use a noun as the subject of the sentence, like the dog is running across the field, you would use a different form of that noun if you used it as the object of the sentence. All right, the children were petting the dog. But in English, we use exactly the same form for the noun, regardless of if it's the subject or if it's the direct object of a sentence or anything like that. The only thing that changes form based on whether it's the subject or the object in English, for the most part, is pronouns. Right? So our pronouns do have grammatical case. So if you're using a pronoun as the subject, you use I or we, and he, she, it, but also just you. Whereas if your pronoun is the object of the sentence, you would say, for instance, I like coffee, but if you said Colin said something to me, you use me as the form of the pronoun if it's the object of the sentence, right?
Right. So grammatical case is when we have the different words for the same thing, like pronouns.
Depending on where they go in the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. It's funny. Yeah, I've never really come across that. I mean, I've taught about pronouns and things, object pronouns, subject pronouns, But grammatical case is not really something that's come up before for me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really something that English gets. It's more of a history thing in English and Romance languages, many European languages, because it comes from the idea in Latin and in other ancient languages. Words changed the way they were spelled for lots of different reasons. By the time you get to a lot of languages today, the only thing that we tend to change the form of is pronouns and verbs, and not many other things change form, especially in English. And so you don't really have this idea of case. It's not dealt with very much. But some languages still have this. And so occasionally you get this question as people coming from a language where they completely change the word depending on where it goes in the sentence. Yeah.
Great. So we've got a couple of questions coming in now. We've got a couple from Susanta, which is great. But first, we've got one from Margot. So,
welcome, Margot.
Margot says, what are the differences between the British phonetics and the American phonetics? So, I mean, when we talk about phonetics, is not really language specific. So I think your question is more, what is the difference between British pronunciation and American pronunciation, or British accents and American accents? Really, phonetics is like the science of speech or language, language. So, and then we often talk about the IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet. And although we have a chart that shows all of the sounds in English, that is not all of the IPA. The IPA has a lot more sounds that are used in other languages we just don't use in English. In fact, there is a slight difference between the IPA, the chart for British English sounds and American English sounds, in that in the American version you don't have the O sound. So, in the word not, Americans say more like not. Is that right, Tony?
Well, two different words, not and not. Not is like nothing.
Yeah.
Not,
but it's not that O sound, that very short O sound. Exactly. It's like an O or an R. Right. Sound.
So there's that's a phonetics difference. It's extremely small, and it's not something you're normally going to have to worry about, right? The phonetics again is how you make each different sound and what sounds there are, right? And so for the most part, British and American English have the same sounds in them, with very, very, very small differences. And it's not in differences in how we say the sound, but there's a few sounds that aren't really used in American or Canadian English. I don't know about South African English or Australian or New Zealand English, but I'm sure there might be very, very tiny differences there as well. But phonetics in general, there's not really a difference. Pronunciation of certain words, obviously, it is very different.
And obviously the difference between, I think, the American English and British English is mostly vocabulary, or I wouldn't call it different words. I would say it's more like different synonyms of the same language, which certain parts of the world favor more than others. And that's really true. That's true within the UK as well as and within the US. It's not the border is not, the distinction is not British and American. It's much more complicated than that, really. Much
broader than that. Yeah, for sure.
So going back to the question, though, the difference between British phonetics and American phonetics, to summarize, they're very, very, very similar. Obviously, the accents are slightly different. I mean, and there's so many little differences, that we can't really go into them all here. But I think the most important one is that O sound. So if you want to sound British, practice the O sound. Now we've got lots of questions from Susanta, which is great. Let's get into those. Let's get into those. So let's
do a couple. Always great questions, Susanta. It's good to have you.
So what does first-hand account mean? First-hand account.
So
we're talking about bank accounts.
Account here means like a story, right? So a first-hand means it's a story told by someone who actually saw it, right? So they are an eyewitness. We also hear the word eyewitness account, right? So this account here means a story, and either firsthand or eyewitness means by someone who was there. If you heard the story from somebody who was there and then you told somebody else, we call it a second-hand account, because it's not by someone who saw it. You heard it from someone else, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So account's a funny word, isn't it? Because it's got different meanings. Like I said, often we talk about bank accounts or, other types of accounts. I got an account on Facebook, or
Right.
we were all logged in on our YouTube accounts, but that's a different type of account.
That's a really interesting history, or why we have that, if you want to hear about it. Because account means story, right? Basically the story of what happened. So when banking became a thing, they called it a bank account because their job was to keep track of how you spent your money, right?
To write your
you could
financial story. Yeah.
It's your financial story. Like, this is all the times you got paid. This is all the times that you paid someone else, right? And so over time, we began to think of the account instead as where you keep your money, instead of the records, the story of your money. And so that now the idea of an account is this personal, private thing that belongs to you, where you keep something. And so now we have accounts on websites, because that relates to the idea of an account in banking, where it really means, a story or telling someone what happened. It's funny how words change.
Yeah. Okay, another question from Susanna. What does "it's brutal on you" mean? Brutal. So, brutal means it's very hard. It's something very difficult.
Almost like as in it's torture, something that is extremely difficult and painful, right? Is something that's brutal, right?
Yeah, like brutality is something that's brutality. We talk about cruelty to animals. It's like it's got a very negative connotation. So it's brutal on you is something that is like so very difficult to the point where you shouldn't be put in that situation.
Yes,
it's almost unlawful or unethical or immoral to put someone through something that is brutal on them.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure what the context is there, Susanna.
We use this metaphorically, even when it's not actually someone being tortured, right? If someone said, "Oh, my boss got angry at me today for something I didn't do," and someone said, "Oh man, that's brutal," right? Okay. It's not actually brutal. No one's being tortured. No one's being put through pain or cruelty. We just mean it's tough. So it's often used as to mean something
hyperbolically.
Hyperbolically, yeah. Exactly. So
Okay. So we'll come back to Susanna, but we just got a question from how do you pronounce this? Communal. Okay. What does immortality mean? Immortality. This is a great one because I love word structure, and this is a great word. So in the middle of that word, you've got the word mortal, which means something that dies, I suppose. Something. If something is mortal, it's something that dies, and then
it causes death.
Right. Yeah.
Like a mortal wound. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a noun. Is that a noun? No, that's an adjective.
No,
mortal.
An adjective. Yeah.
That's an adjective.
Mortal.
Now, one of the things you can do to an adjective to turn it into a noun is add ity on the end. Ity. So mortality. Your mortality is the fact that you're going to die. Another example of this would be, we just talked about brutal. So you can do the same thing with brutal. You can say brutality. So brutal is an adjective, and brutality is the noun form of that. And then im put on the beginning is one way that we can make a word opposite.
One of many.
Yeah. So in this sense, immortality means, if something is immortal, it means it's something that doesn't die or can't die, lives forever. So immortality is the noun form of something that lives forever.
Yeah, the fact that this doesn't live forever, right? So if we talk about the immortality of justice, we're talking about the fact that justice lives forever, right? Or whatever, right?
Yeah. Great. Yeah,
it's a good question. We like it when people are obviously, they're out there reading or watching things, and one of the best ways to practice your English skills is to be out there, even if you don't understand everything. And then a great way to deal with it when you don't understand is go and ask, right? And that's perfect. We love these kinds of questions because it means people are out there listening and reading and having conversations and stretching their English abilities. So good job.
Yeah, great. We have got a few great questions today, which is good because I wasn't sure how many people would watch because we are on this new time, which we hadn't really promoted. We just came out of the blue. It's great to see people. Let's get back to the questions. Suzanne, so again, says, can good luck be used as a verb? I think I heard this sentence. I good luck to him. Now,
so this is actually this is actually a good question because it explains something about English that can be a little confusing. Oftentimes when we're telling someone that we want them to do something, we're wishing someone or we're ordering someone to do something, oftentimes the subject gets dropped off, and then sometimes even the verb does. So for instance, we don't say, when we say go outside, we just leave off the subject. We don't say you go outside. So oftentimes when something is an imperative, it's a command or a wish, we don't use the verb. Or we say have a good day. We don't say you have a good day. We just leave the subject off. Now sometimes, especially if you're wishing someone something like that have, we even leave off the verb. So we just, instead of saying have a good day, we just say good day, right? Or good morning. We're saying is I wish you a good morning, but we leave off all of that. So the same thing is when you hear someone say good luck or good luck to you or good luck to him, they're just leaving off have. You have good luck. They're wishing you good luck, or I wish you good luck. But you would not use that with the subject. So you can't use it as a verb because it's not a verb. When you just say good luck to you, you're leaving off the verb, you're leaving off the subject. So you wouldn't say I good luck to you. You just say good luck to you. Or if you want to use the verb, you say I wish you good luck, right? Or something like that. So it's not a verb, but many things like this sound like they're being used as a verb, like good morning to you, right? Really, the I wish you part is just kind of dropped off of that. And that happens a lot when you're wishing someone something.
It's like a contraction.
It is.
Yeah, we've contracted out the verb completely because if you say this, it's kind of obvious what you mean.
Exactly. And that specifically works for imperatives, like when you're telling someone to do something, or when you're telling someone, you're wishing someone something, like to have a good day or good luck or something like that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll come back to Suzanne's questions in a minute, but we'll skip ahead a little bit to Zahira, who says, thanks for what you're doing. I asked last time a question, but did not have the opportunity to attend the session. And my question is, how, as a non-native speaker, do I make a clear distinction between idioms, proverbs, and phrasal verbs? Hang on, let me just read the rest from here. It's quite confusing. It's quite confusing for me. So what is the difference between idioms, proverbs, and phrasal verbs?
Well, proverbs are a kind of idiom. So that's just a kind of idiom. Remember, idioms are anything that that doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like. It means something else that members of that language or speakers of that language just know, right? So a phrasal verb is very close to this, right? Because it changes the meaning of the verb, but not necessarily in an obvious way. Like take note, and then take off. A plane takes off. Like it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with take off, right? So where exactly the line between an idiom and a phrasal verb is? Well, a phrasal verb is always a verb followed by a preposition that changes the meaning of that verb, sometimes in a literal way, sometimes in a non-literal way, right? So anything that doesn't fit into that category, you could call an idiom. But the exact line between a phrasal verbs and an idiom, it doesn't really matter because they both do the same thing. They're both changing the meaning of the phrase according to a way you just have to know it, right? It doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like, right?
Yeah. So I think it's good if you think about the adjective form of idiom, which is idiomatic. Mm-hmm. And something can be a little bit idiomatic, or it can be very idiomatic. Yes. So this means, and I would say that phrasal verbs are like a little bit idiomatic. Some more than others, obviously, and then because it's normally just the one word that's being changed, whereas an idiom is something like, oh, it's raining cats and dogs. It doesn't mean we're talking about the weather. It's nothing to do with cats or dogs. We've changed the whole sentence to mean something completely different. So that's an idiom. And then a proverb, I guess.
So when someone says a stitch in time, right? They're quoting a larger proverb that says a stitch in time saves 9, right? But they might just say, a stitch in time. Like I did it today because, a stitch in time. Right? It's still idiomatic. You have to know the proverb, and it doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. It means get things done sooner rather than later, right? But it's more idiomatic because now they're not even saying the whole proverb. They're just referring to a small part of the proverb.
Yeah.
And the thing we were just talking about is also an example of something that's a little idiomatic, right? In English, when you are giving a command or you're wishing someone something and you leave off the verb, it no longer means exactly what it sounds like. So good luck to him you may not realize that means I wish good luck to him, right? But it's there, and a native speaker understands it. That one's it's common in many different languages. So idiomatic covers a huge range of different things, from things that are common in many languages to some things that only exist in 1 or 2 languages, right? Yeah. We use the phrase idiom as a kind of a bucket where we put all the things that don't fit under other categories, whereas things like proverbs and phrasal verbs are more specific. Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. And phrasal verbs is a a whole topic we could do a year series of live streams just on idioms and phrasal verbs as well. So great question. Thank you very much. I hope that's helpful. If it is, please give us a thumbs up. And so let's move on. I'll just quickly say hi to Abdeluhab from Algeria. Thank you for watching. You're very welcome. Now let's do. We have got some questions. More questions from Rukmael, I think is the pronunciation. But we'll just quickly do a couple more from Suzanne. So first, we just work our way down the list basically. So don't worry, we are going to get to you. Don't worry if we haven't yet, but we will get to you. Suzanne says sometimes I hear there you go. This phrase, in which context is it used? There you go. Well, if you're giving somebody something, you can say, there you go.
It's also it's used to when you're handing something over, or you're giving someone what they want. It doesn't have to be a physical object. Like someone says, I just wanted you to apologize, and you say, okay, I'm sorry. There you go. You're still, it means you're giving them what they wanted, right? But we often use it, again, idiomatically as a metaphor to mean, like just okay, or that's the way it is. Someone says, it's been a rough year, but there you go. That's how it works, right? So it's just kind of used generally to say this is it, or that's all.
That's how it is,
right?
Yeah. So it's used in a couple of different contexts, either giving someone something or just saying that's how it is. Great. Okay, and one more from Susanne, for now. So what does in and out of detention mean? Detention. Well, do you want to explain what detention is first, and then?
Sure. Detention is some kind of like jail. It could be. It sometimes is used as a less serious form. Like you would also hear the phrase "in and out of prison" or "in and out of jail." In and out of detention is usually a less serious form of this. So you might use the word detention instead of jail for instance, minors, right? They go to juvenile detention. They don't go to prison, right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes in and out of detention is used like the phrase in and out of jail or in and out of prison, except for a minor or a young person. And it just means that they keep getting sent to prison or jail or detention, and then they get out, and then they do something and get sent back. And that's what people mean when they say in and out of. And you hear this phrase for all sorts of things that are similar. In and out of rehab. If a person keeps going to rehab for an addiction, they finish rehab, they go out, and then a few months later they go back in because they had problems again, right? I can't think of any other off the top of my head, but you hear this phrase for anything that's kind of a bad thing that you hopefully you only ever have to do once. In and out of depression. I can't think of another one.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Also, I don't know if you do this in the States, but detention is also used at school as a form of punishment. Right. But that in that context, it means just holding them, not letting the students go when like everyone else goes. Right. Yeah, keeping them for an hour, half an hour, or something.
That's true.
But yeah, it's got a sort of negative connotation in it, so it's normally used for punishment, or you could say. I had a lot of work. I was detained at work because there was a lot to do, maybe. But it's a bit more, in that context, though, it's more voluntary. And I think being detained implies that it's sort of involuntary.
So if you're apologizing to someone because you're late, you could say, "I'm sorry, I was detained at work," because it is a negative that you weren't able to leave, right? Yeah. But it's not as commonly used for that. Whereas the word detention pretty much is only used for basically imprisoned, but less serious than prison or jail, either like juvenile detention or just kept after school for an hour. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we've got another question here from Rukmail, who says, "What does ragged mean? I heard it with hair, so ragged hair." So yeah, what does ragged mean, Tony?
Well, rags, right? Rags are odd ends of cloth that they don't fit, they don't match. So a rag blanket is just made out of all kinds of small pieces of cloth sewn together. They don't match. So ragged hair is where your haircut doesn't match. Some of your hair is longer or shorter than the other. Basically, it's just a really poor haircut. Like imagine you had to cut your own hair with like shears or something like that, and you couldn't get it nice and even. That's what a ragged haircut is. Yeah. And we use this, again, ragged for lots of things where it doesn't, it's either worn out or it doesn't match or it looks poor. Or
it could be used to describe a garden or a tree, maybe. Something that's old and not necessarily broken, but sort of worn out.
So rags are both made out of old pieces of cloth. So they're like they often are worn out. But also rags don't match each other. So it means one of two things, either worn out or like mismatched and not quality made, right?
Yeah. Okay, great question. And we've got a few more from Rukmail. So here's the next one. What does whom mean? So whom, this is a good question, right? So what is the difference between who and whom?
So this is exactly what Jack Darby was asking about case. There are a few different words in English that do change the form of the word. It's not a different word, just like I and me are not different words. They're just different forms of the word. Who and whom are just the different forms of who. Again, there's not many words that change form based on how they go in the sentence, except verbs, but who is one of them. When who is the subject of the sentence, it uses the form who. Whom is when it is the object of the sentence. So you might say, who gave you that? Or you might say, give this to the next person whom you see, right? So that's technically what it is. But the reality is that whom now is less and less used, except in formal writing. So it's one of those things that if you're writing formal things, you need to know when to use whom. But when you're reading it or anything like that, it just means the same thing. Whom just means the same thing as who. So it's not something you have to worry too much.
I feel like most of the time you can just say who, and
in speech,
would be fine. Yeah.
Yes, like you're very rarely going to find a place in when you're speaking that you would need to say whom. And if you're writing it, really only if you're writing something very formal or something that needs to be edited pretty precisely for some reason. Every now and then you'll meet someone who is
this is what I was going to say. You're going to meet people, these sort of grammar nuts who will say whom.
That's the point.
When you must say whom when it's an object, and you must say who when that's correct and everything else is wrong. But would you agree with that or not? Because I don't think I would.
Sure. I mean, yes, that is the rule. That is what whom means. But the reality is it's not that commonly used. It's in the process of becoming archaic, right? It maybe didn't used to be. It used to be good, and there is a good reason for this, which I'm not going to go into because I just don't think it's that important. This is the kind of thing that I would talk to someone if they wanted to go into publishing. Or they wanted to become an editor, not someone who wants to speak English or be able to understand or even go to university. It's the kind of thing if you need to learn it, learn it. Otherwise, it's just not. So, I mean, rules in English, we talk about this a lot. Rules in English aren't laws. They're the bones, they're the structure of explaining a language, but English is constantly growing and changing. So you can't get too attached to the rules because they don't. The rules are not the language in English. Rules are the structure we try to give to understand the language, but the reality is the language is constantly growing. Yeah.
Great. Okay, another great question. And here's one more.
Akshay and Anna have both joined us. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great. One more from Rukmael, who says, what does nonplussed mean? Good question. Nonplussed. I don't even know.
Okay.
Nonplussed.
So nonplussed is a word that I talk about a lot. Some people get annoyed at me for talking about this word because it is one of those words in the English language that means it has two meanings and they are exactly opposite. Nonplussed either means you're startled and you don't know what to do. So if someone says something surprising and you're nonplussed, like, oh, what? But it also means someone tells you something surprising and you don't react at all. They are exactly opposites of each other. Why? And in this case, there isn't even a good reason. Nonplussed comes from the I think it's Latin, nonplus, like nothing. They're like no response. So that's it. The original meaning is someone tells you something surprising and you just don't react at all. But sometime in history, people started using this word to mean startled, probably because that's what they thought it sounded like. It sounds like a word that means startled, and so because that's how English works.
So
exactly.
So this is a word that I think
English works this way. It just became that it took on that meaning because that's how people use it. But the old meaning still exists as well. I would say now 90% of the time, when you see this word, it means startled. But occasionally there's a person who's a purist and uses it to mean no response at all. So it's kind of a funny word. Talk about how crazy English can be.
It's a word that it confuses me to the point where I don't use it. I don't consider that word part of my vocabulary. Obviously, I know what it means if I read it in a sentence, but obviously I would need some context to know what it means because it can mean one thing or its complete opposite, like you said. and that's why I was a little confused. Yeah, so that's why I'm glad we've got you here, Tony, because I don't know how we've answered
it's
that
such a
last.
funny word. It's a beautiful word. It sounds great, and you hear it a lot in fiction. People just love this word. They say, someone said something and everyone was nonplussed because it sounds dramatic and intense. And that may be true, but it's a weird one.
Okay, Akshay, we'll get to your questions soon. We are working our way down. So we've got a couple more from some other people. I think there was one more from, a few more from Mail. So,
are we going to go back and answer the rest of Susanta's questions as well?
Yes. Yeah. Should we do that now?
Yeah.
No,
sure.
I think hang on. I think we did all of Susanta's questions.
I think we missed. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, and trump card. Yeah. Okay, let's be honest here. Let's be honest there, or let's be honest here. What does that mean?
I think it's more often here. Yeah.
Yeah, here.
And it means one of two things. It means literally let's real talk, like let's get down to the truth here. And you either use it to call out someone else and say, you're not telling the whole story. Let's be honest here. If someone's like, they're trying to explain some complex concept, and you say, well, let's be honest here. It's also because of this, right? Or you might say it when you're about to say something that is maybe a little unexpected or a little bit shocking, but you just want to say, well, we're getting down to the truth here, right? So let's be honest here. No one likes, I don't know, the Star Wars prequels or whatever you're going to say. If you're going to say something a little, that might be brutally honest. No, I'm just an example. I'm not saying, right. But if when you're going to say something maybe controversial because you think it's it's the truth, right?
Yeah.
But it really means literally what it is. Like, let's stop being dishonest. Let's say what's actually going on. Right.
Okay, great. And Susanta also asked, what does trump card mean?
So it comes from the idea. Colin and I and some other friends were playing this game recently where this came up. So in some card games where you have to where if you play a card of one color or one type, the other people have to play that same card. Oftentimes in those kinds of games, one of the types of card, one suit, is called the trump card. So if you play that, it beats a card, any card, no matter how high it is, right? So if you're playing spades, where spades is the trump card, if someone plays even like a king of hearts or an ace of hearts, and you play even a 2 or a 3 of spades, you still win because the trump card beats all other types of card. So figuratively, what would happen is people that were cheating, or whether they were cheating or not, people would talk about this, that they would keep a trump card up their sleeve, which is part of where the idea of keeping a card up your sleeve comes from, so you could cheat and pull it out when you needed it. And so it started being used in lots of different things. If you had a trump card, it was some secret or something that you could do or use that would beat anything else that anyone else was doing, right? So if you had a piece of blackmail against a politician, you could use that as your trump card, because if they ever disagreed with you, bam, you could pull that out, right? So it just means something that is going to beat anything else, no matter how good it is a trump card. Right.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay. So we've got some great questions. Zahira, and Akshay. We'll get to your questions. We've got a couple more from Rukmail first. So yeah, here's one. How is whipping used as an adjective, and what does it exactly mean?
So you're talking about like whipping cream?
Yeah, I think he must be, yeah. Because as an adjective, that's the only...
Yeah, or a whipping post or a whipping boy. It means something for whipping. It's not, I don't know if I would necessarily call this an adjective. I mean, I know what it is called. I just don't want to go into the details of that. whipping cream is the name of the thing, right? It's cream for whipping, right? A whipping post is a post you use for whipping. A whipping boy
That's
is a
two
boy.
different uses of the word whip to whip.
True.
So,
well,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it does.
Well, yeah, no, I guess no, it's the same. It's just it's used a lot in
the context is different,
cooking,
right?
And in torture.
Yes, it means different things, right? Well, a whipping post is often used as an idiom to mean an argument that people keep coming back to. They call that a whipping post sometimes, and so on. So yeah, whipping is not really an adjective. You can't just use it as an adjective generally. It's just in the name of certain things. Yeah. So some words, some nouns are multiple words, right? And you know, for instance,
like a goalpost. It's not goal. It's not the word. It's not being used as an adjective to describe the post. It's just the compound. It's just being used as a compound noun.
Yes.
As one of the words in a compound noun to make the name for something.
Yes.
So, but it looks like grammatically, it looks like it's being used as an adjective.
Yeah.
And it kind of is. It's kind of describing the noun, the second noun, but it's not really. But it's not an adjective. That doesn't make it an adjective. It's
exactly. I mean, yeah, and there is this concept, which again, I don't want to go into attributive and stuff like that right now. So,
yeah, I mean, I think any compound noun is like this. Orange juice.
Exactly. Orange juice.
Especially as orange, it's a noun as in the fruit, but it's also the color is also colors are adjectives. So yeah.
So this happens a lot in English to make compound nouns, where you just use another word. It could be a verb. It could be an adjective. It could be another noun, but really it just is part of the name of something. It's not really being used as it's part of speech. Yeah.
Okay, next one. Rookmail again says, "What does communal mean?" Communal.
Yeah, I mean, this communal is like related to the word community. Something is communal if it's shared in a community. So for instance, if you've got 2 or 3 people and you have a car that you all share, it's your communal car, right? If you have, a bunch of people living in a house and only one bathroom, that's your communal bathroom, right? So it's a communal is an adjective that means that something is shared amongst a group.
Often if you rent an apartment or a property, then they might talk about communal areas, which is like areas that you share with your neighbors. Yeah. Okay. One more. Rugmo says, "I used to hear this adverb mostly apparently. Can you tell me its use?" So apparently, I think he's asking about.
Apparently. So you use apparently when you want to say something is, but you really want to make sure that we know that you don't actually know if it is, right? So if I say, like some kind of a fact that you don't really know, but you think it's true, then you could say it's apparently true. Well, the Queen is apparently the oldest person in the world. You just mean it looks that way, or you think that is true. Right. Or if something is debated or you only saw it. Right. Oftentimes, if you're being kind of sneaky and you're telling a story, you might say, "And I saw a person who was apparently," again, say the Queen, but you saw that person, you thought they were, but you don't really know. So that's when you're
not committing to it. You're just
exactly.
Apparently, it's not me saying that. It's just
exactly.
Yeah.
It's used, and again, in English, we tend to use indirect means to say something if we're either not sure or we're trying to be polite and we don't want to get in trouble for it, right? So instead of saying, "I heard that," you would say, so this apparently, you hear, anytime you're not really sure about something. It means literally like by sight as opposed to by touch. So it's the difference between, you see, just because you see something doesn't mean it's true. You might have misunderstood what you saw.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Over on Facebook, Zahira has asked a question. Why is the S in "how come" dropped so that we don't say "how comes"? We often say "how come." So I don't think the S has been dropped. It's just how the expression is how come, right? How comes is not.
Yeah. So how come is an abbreviation for how does it come, or something like that. So depending on what the subject is, if the subject is something where you would have to say comes, you would. The reason come it doesn't have the s there is because it's not in the third person singular form, basically. So it is just how come, not how comes.
Yeah. So so how come means pretty much the same thing as why, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference, or what's the history? When did how come become
I could tell you when, but it's very, very old, and in many languages it's still, you still say it this way. One of the ways to say why is how did it get here? It literally. So for instance, and there's lots of languages where it still works this way. Instead of saying I did this, you say this came to be, or something like that. It really, it's like asking someone, instead of what is your nationality, you say where do you come from. It's just taking a step back and explaining why. We use come or go a lot to talk about how something happens, even if there's not any actual physical moving involved, right? Like I'm going to talk to you later. It doesn't mean I'm moving. It's talking about something happening. The same thing with come, right? Like how did it come to this? Well, we're not talking about, it physically moving to where we are. We're just talking about happenings, right? So how come, how did it happen is the same thing as why, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you exactly when, but this is long time.
But we're not dropping
maybe older than English.
The S. It's just this. This is it's without the S. It's not this expression.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks for that question. I hope that's helpful. Please give us a thumbs up if it is, and if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. Our live stream schedule is going to possibly be a little irregular in the next few weeks.
We're going to try some different times, maybe see how it works for different people.
Yeah. So make sure you're subscribed and you hit the bell icon, so when we do go live, you will get notified. Otherwise, you may miss us.
Yes. Also, don't forget, you can always check the website, englishlanguageclub.co.uk/live, to see when our next live stream is scheduled. Once we have one scheduled. Yeah.
Great. And once you go there, you can then click. Click a button to make it so that you will be notified when we do actually go live at that time. Okay. So,
Anna's comment there?
Anna's comment?
The one in Russian.
Oh, this one? About,
yes.
Thanks for your lessons. I often use with my students. Yeah, that's great. I know that lots of teachers use our videos in lessons and things, so that's really great. You're very welcome to do that. And as long as you just make sure you tell your students to subscribe as well. That's all we ask for in return.
And even invite them to the live stream, if they want to ask questions, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So another question from Rick Mail. Don't worry, Akshay, we'll get to you. We will get to you. And any other questions? I know we've got quite a few there.
We'll keep going through
that I haven't read yet. So Rick Mail says, I heard literally too many times. Can you explain it to me?
So literally, what literally actually means is that it's not figurative. When you say it, you mean what you said, right? So if you say, I was literally glued to my seat, it means I'm not just pretending. Someone actually glued me to a seat. However,
it means for real. Literally it means for real.
For real. Like not a metaphor, not an idiom. I'm saying what I said. And actually, we're just going through the questions in order. We'll get to your question. But nowadays, people have started using this term to just mean really, or like it was insane, like so much. So when someone says I was literally glued to my seat, they just mean I was really paying attention, like they really had me. So it's funny because this is another one that means two opposite things.
The opposite, yeah.
Right. What it actually means is actually. Like I'm not messing around. And if you're using this in anything remotely formal, like a paper or a book or anything like that, you should make sure you use it to mean that, right? But oftentimes
to
you
mean
hear
for
people
real.
use this to mean for real, yeah. But oftentimes people just use this as like a kind of a really, not like just
Well,
the way you would use the word really, meaning a lot, not actually, you know. So this can be a frustrating and confusing word for some people, just because it's
and I think you got to
used
listen to the tone. You got to listen to the tone. If somebody says literally, then they probably mean figuratively or emphatically.
Yeah.
So good question. Very strange word.
Yes, we had a lot of these double meaning words here today.
Yeah. So
Akshay's question.
So tell us phrases about power, electricity, and marry.
So marriage. So for like, if you're talking about marrying, like we would say getting married, right? Is usually the way you say that. Marry is like, you can say, I'm going to marry that person. But most of the time when people are talking about marriage, it's not their own, because, for every time you usually get married once or a few times, but then everybody get married. So we often use it in a passive, right? Getting married, right? Was married, have been married, right? I have been married for a long time. So we use that that kind of way of talking about it much more often than we use it as a verb in any of the simple tense or anything like that. Or even getting married, right? Again, it's just how it usually works.
I'm not quite sure how that relates to phrases about electricity, though.
But phrases might just be two different things. So phrases about electricity, again, you could say we've lost power, right? Or the electricity is out. Both means your electricity has stopped working. We talked about saving electricity, which is funny because you're not actually talking about saving electricity. You're talking about saving money on your electricity bill, but we say saving electricity or conserving electricity. Any other phrases jump to mind?
Not really. Actually, let us know if that's what you mean. I'm not 100% sure we've understood your question properly. So let us know if that's what you mean. But we'll answer your next question now. You're asking, are you deciding to run the Zoom meeting? So Akshay was one of the people who joined us about a month ago on Zoom when we ran some Zoom sessions and we opened them up for everyone. Which was great fun, and we're going to continue to do that when we can for our Patreon. So the plan was always that it's just going to be for people who are supporting us on Patreon. For details about when the next one will be, if you head over to Patreon, I think the link is in the description, and if you sign up, I'm going to make it open to everyone at any level on Patreon. So for just I think the lowest level is £2 a month. You can get in that Zoom call, and we'll do one a month at least. So so we did open it up to everyone. Maybe we'll do that again, but we've got no plans to do that in the foreseeable future. But I'm sure we will do. It's just we've both got a little bit busy with other things unexpectedly in the last month or so. So yes, we will do other more Zoom calls. The best way to make sure you get invited to that is to join us on Patreon. So let's see. Akshay just says that's what I mean. So I think we must have answered the previous question.
Well, good.
Okay, great.
That was
great, and great to see you again, Akshay.
Yes.
So Chino, got a question from Chino de Nvidia, who says, "Is it okay to drop the schwa sound?"
And I wonder if this is related to their next comment, where they say some people think they are pronouncing a vowel, where when there is a schwa between consonants. For instance, sometimes they hear an E in people. Do you mean between the P and the L? People, instead of... so if that's what you're asking about, like, is it okay to drop the schwa sound? There isn't a schwa sound there. Is there or is there?
No, I think if there was a schwa sound, it would be... it would sound like pull, not pull, pull, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like that's an interesting question. Is it okay to drop the schwa sound? And the schwa sound, again, we don't like using the schwa sound, but yes, that short vowel sound, right, is one of the first things that gets dropped when people are pronouncing words very quickly. Oftentimes in writing, they'll put an apostrophe there. So for instance, have you heard about the new movie, right? And you drop out the very short vowel sound, right? Exactly. So is it okay to drop the schwa sound? Like, it is something, schwas do tend to get left out when people are talking fast. Yeah, exactly. If you're talking about between the P and the L, you just pronounce that smoothly. You don't try to pronounce a vowel between that. Pull, P, pull, a bull, so on.
Yeah. But the thing about the schwa sound, or the sound, also known as the mid-central vowel, is it does get other vowels get dropped to that when we speak very quickly, especially in British English, I think.
Yes. Yes.
So we say mother, father, brother.
Right. And this is just because there's only one short, like hyper short, super short vowel sound in English, and we just call it all the schwa. So anytime any vowel is pronounced short enough, it's just going to become a schwa. And if that is being pronounced shortly enough, it'll just kind of disappear. Right? Yeah,
and again, that relates. What we always say is pronunciation is physical, and how it's getting. When all vowels, when they get compressed, they physically become like a schwa.
Exactly.
Because,
and this is. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say vowels depend on how open or closed your mouth is, or how open or rounded your lips are, and the position of your tongue. So. But with the that's why it's called the mid-central vowel. It's because everything's kind of in the middle and the center. It's all your mouth isn't open or closed. Your lips aren't rounded or open, or whatever they call it. I can't remember. Everything's just relaxed. It's just a very neutral, physically neutral. Very and that makes it very easy. So everything, when you kind of compress it or relax it, or as you say it quickly, it goes back to that kind of neutral position and comes out as a.
And this relates to Ruchmael's other question about how do natives usually merge one word with another. And again, usually, because pronunciation is physical, as you say words faster, like if you're pronouncing the sounds correctly, then as you say the sounds faster and faster, and they meld together, the way you do it will be the same way that a native speaker does it, as long as you're pronouncing the sounds correctly to begin with. And so that's really what you want to focus on, is make sure you're pronouncing all of those sounds correctly, physically, because then as words assimilate into each other, the way it does that is just naturally the way that those sounds sound when you make them very quickly, one after another.
Great. Yeah. Okay, another question here. So some people argue that saying words with the correct stress is better than saying each syllable correctly. What do you think? So, yeah, I don't know if I'd put it like that, but I can see what you mean.
I mean, it's really one of those things where if you're just saying all of your syllables perfectly, but you never make the stress correctly, it's going to sound really weird. If you're every single time you're making your stress perfectly, but your syllables are completely, nobody can understand any of them, that's also going to be completely useless. So it's not one of those things where you need, like, if one of them is lagging behind, work on that one, right?
Yeah.
But there's no, like, it's not that one of them needs to be, they both need to be moving forward. I think in general, it's probably more important to say the syllables correctly so that people can at least understand the word. If you say something very slowly, then someone might be able to understand even if the stress is wrong. Whereas if you're not pronouncing the words correctly at all, that how are they going to understand? But really, it's just something you've got to do both of. It's not that one is more important than the other.
And I mean, in my videos, I haven't talked very much about stress. And that, I think that is deliberate because for two reasons. I think it kind of happens naturally that you get the right stress as you just start to learn, you start to hear and listen to people speaking. You know, you'll pick up what the correct stress is, so you don't need to have it written down. So it's kind of, you learn it naturally, but also, I feel like people overthink phonetics, and I guess that's kind of because it goes so deep. You know, it's the science of pronunciation, and so it goes into every aspect, and it is, you know, a science on each and, you know, in its own right. But as people just using it to learn to improve our pronunciation, as a, you know, because we're trying to learn English, I feel like we don't need to go that deep, or as deep as we could. That's not to say that I don't think we should talk about stress at all. I think it is useful, but it's with pronunciation and phonetics. Just remember that we don't need to learn everything about phonetics. We're just using it to help with what we might have problems with. Yeah. So,
I think we missed Ruchmel's last question, which is how to use the verb seesaw.
Okay. Seesaw.
Seesaw just means to keep changing your mind about something, to keep going back and forth. So you could say he was seesawing on whether he was going to vote, right? Or he was seesawing about his trip to Florida, right? Just, you know, where you keep changing your mind about something.
Here we go, yeah. Finally found it, just as you finished your answer. Yeah, seesaw is a verb. How do we use it in a sentence? Yeah. It's funny because seesaw, is that originally the sort of playground ride? Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the etymology of that word is you're up and you see the person, and then you go down and you saw the person. But it's a very, very informal verb in English. But seesawing, like, to go back and forth, is a pretty common concept.
Yeah. So to change your mind frequently on the same issue. Great. Okay. We got number one. Great to see you, number one. One of our regulars. So number one asks, any good technique to use idioms in writing and sentences? How to improve writing skills? I mean, using idioms correctly is a good way. Is a good thing to do in writing.
But using an idiom incorrectly will immediately jump out to a native speaker, right? And so it's one of those things you have to be careful with. You know, don't use an idiom unless you are really sure you're using it correctly. Kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Phrasal verbs are good because it's really easy to look up the exact meaning of a phrasal verb, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas more complicated idioms, it can be, you look up what they mean, but they also have certain unspoken rules of when you use them, right? Cats and dogs means a lot of something, but we don't say, I was getting mail like cats and dogs.
Well, isn't it only rain we use it to talk about?
Well,
I don't know.
raining cats and dogs, but also, cats and dogs is kind of a callback to the idiom. What I mean to say is that idioms are rarely as simple as just looking up the definition, right? There's ways they're used, situations they're used, right? So phrasal verbs are a great place to start because they're usually a lot more straightforward. And if you look it up, it'll usually tell you like what specifically it's used for, like take off, means with an airplane, or if you're talking about a piece of clothing, it literally just means take it off of your body or whatever. Right? Or taking a Band-Aid off or something. So phrasal verbs are a good place to start. Use idioms that you're very, very comfortable with, that you really, really know. And avoid using idioms unless you're really, really sure, just because it's going to really stand out to a native speaker if you use it wrong.
Great. Okay, we've got one more question, and then we're going to have to draw it to a close. Chino says, what do you guys think about mixing accents? Sometimes it's easier to say the T in better rather than dropping it. So mixing, there's kind of two questions, isn't it, really? Because you've got the T is something we've talked about a lot, how we drop that, and it's different in British English and American English. And accents is also something that we've talked about a lot, and how it's not, the English Language Club philosophy on accents is there's nothing wrong with an accent or a foreign accent. I hate the term accent reduction or trying to lose your accent. There's nothing wrong with having an accent. What's important is that you have correct pronunciation. Now, it's totally possible to have correct pronunciation and an accent that's not native. And ultimately, the only thing that matters is, are you understood, right? Yeah. So in answer to this question, if you're speaking to an American, most Americans, unless they are part of a really closed off community, will understand British accents perfectly well. So if you pronounce a handful of words the way they are pronounced in British English, virtually everyone will understand you, right? As long as you're pronouncing it, you're pronouncing the sounds correctly and everything. So which accent you're saying it in is not nearly as important for being understood. It might, and it's not even that unusual. It's not going to stick out as weird, because a lot of people who were educated overseas wind up with a little bit of a British accent in certain things. I remember it was one person. I can't remember if it was numbers or something, but there was one tiny little aspect that he just had a really strong Australian accent in. But it's not does not make it hard to understand. Yeah. I was in New York,
but that's fine. It's fine for it to be funny. Yeah.
I was in New York, and I was trying to buy a bottle of water, and the lady just couldn't understand what I was saying. So I ended up, I had to sort of put on an American accent and say water. And my friend who was with me, who's American, was thought it was hilarious because he could tell. He knew because he lives in England, and he could understand me when I said water, and he could tell that I was putting on an American accent.
But the reality is that's actually a completely different problem, which is that some people's accents are so thick they cannot understand what would be considered normative English, and you will encounter that in parts of big cities, or in countryside in the U.S., or in small villages in Britain, or different places. I don't know. There's places where people's accents are so strong and they're so insular that they just don't have enough exposure to people that have other accents. And it's not just that they can't understand your accent because yours is too different. They might not understand a person who is perfectly native speaker, perfectly well educated in a super typical RP or a Midwest accent. It's that's not your problem. You're not the one who's doing something wrong. Not that they're doing something wrong, but that it's their accent that is causing the problem for you, not yours. So don't feel too bad about that.
But again, there's nothing wrong with accent.
Exactly.
But there is. But and having
a better accent wouldn't have helped you. Right, you were able to talk like the way she understood it, not that you were saying something more correctly. She just didn't understand your accent, right?
Yeah, and there is. So we talk about good pronunciation, and we use what is often called RP as a kind of standard British English to learn. Now you might, if you learn that and then you go and move to Edinburgh in Scotland, and everyone's speaking with a different accent, then by all means, if you find that you're not being understood, that's unlikely, but you might find that to help be understood quicker and better, you might start to develop certain aspects of the Scottish accent. But I wouldn't try to learn the Scottish accent beforehand if you didn't know that you were going to be going to live in Scotland, because there's so many. If you're going to do that, then you might as well learn Australian and Welsh and South African, and and then same in America, you've got the New York accent's different to Chicago and California and Texas, Florida.
Which is why, we don't really think that learning an accent or learning to speak a specific accent is really all that useful, because you're always going to encounter people whose accent is totally different, and they may not understand your accent. You might not understand their accent, just because there are way too many accents. So your best bet is just to learn to pronounce the words in as normative a way as possible. So that the majority of people who speak that language will be able to understand you, not target yourself towards specific groups. So in my opinion, mixing accents is totally okay, and it's something that's going to happen inevitably. Even if you in some imaginary world, you learned all your English from me and Colin, the words that I say more often, you might pronounce more with an American or Canadian accent. The words that Colin uses more often, you might learn to pronounce with a British accent, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Everyone's accent is somewhere on a spectrum anyway, right?
Okay, so I did say that would be the last question. We did just have one question come through from Crypto Swan, which I think we can answer quite quickly. So what is the most standard format to say and write the date? This is definitely going to be the last question. The most standard. So in America, it's different.
It depends on where you are, right? And it is actually different in there's slight differences in most different places. So you just have to find out depending on where you're going. I always, for that purpose, use the words Monday, February 2nd, 1983 or whatever, because if you use the words instead of numbers, you really can't go wrong. 3rd of February, February 3rd, no one cares. Right?
I like to use the day, then the month, then the year, because then you're going from smallest period of time, medium, and then longest period of time. So I always say my birthday is the 19th of November, 1978.
And the only rule is if you put the number first, use of. So 19th of February rather than usually 19th February. That's not quite as common.
With
put
dates,
the number first, use of. Technically,
we don't use numbers with dates. We use what we call ordinals. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, rather than the 19 of or So right. I hope that's helpful. There isn't really a most.
There is no one standard
way.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Today may have been a bit of a surprise for most people because we didn't announce that we were going to come at this time. We might be, like I was saying, for the next few weeks, it may be a little irregular when we're going to just do these live streams as and when we can. So we might be back next week at this time, but it might be a different time. So now more than ever, it's more important than ever to make sure you're subscribed and you hit the bell icon so that you do get notified. And as we were saying earlier, as soon as we know when we're going to do it, it will appear on here at englishllanguageclub.co.uk/live. You'll be able to see there, but that may not be until a day or so before we actually do it. So best thing to do is make sure you're subscribed, and give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this show, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.